Hi guys, Janica here from Multispective. I'm here to share with you a new episode where I interview Sin Yian. She talks about abuse when she was a child by the hands of her mother and the ways that it's impacted her in her later on adult years and the ways that she's navigated that throughout her adulthood. This episode would be really important for you if you've ever had sort of a complicated relationship with your own parents. You're kind of working through some of the issues that you've experienced as a childhood, some of the childhood traumas that maybe you weren't so familiar with growing up, kind of are realizing as you're aging and navigating through life. I also really like some of the other nuggets of like inspiration, knowledge that she sort of passed along, ways that we can look out for children's behaviors and actions that may be calling out for certain kinds of help without explicitly expressing it. Stay tuned and please drop a comment letting me know how it went for you. Sin Yian, why don't you start off just by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
So I actually grew up I was born and raised in Germany. I went to an American school. It was one of those DOD schools where, they have like American army bases all around the world. They have them in like Japan, Philippines, and they also have them in Germany. So I don't know how my parents got me in, but they actually got me. I was the only non-American citizen in that school. So all of them were army kids. So that's kind of like who I grew up with. So I grew up in a very multicultural setting. So with Asian parents, living in Germany, going to an American school. And then after I finished high school, I went to college in the States, and then after a few years there, I went back to Malaysia, and now I'm currently living in Thailand.
I'm really intrigued though by the army school thing that you mentioned. What kind of a school was it? Was it really highly disciplined? Were you also required to be really sort of confined within certain rules in the school?
Actually, no. It was just it's the parents that were in the army, and then the kids were just it's almost like a normal school. But I guess now that I've grown up and I reflect back on the culture that was in that school, probably there was more of a disciplinary component more than I was aware of, just because like the parents are in the army, and like I know that a few of my friends, they had to like salute to their dad, or like they had to kind of, yeah, like they would have to call their parents like, oh, like ma'am or sir, or it wasn't like mom or dad, or they would have to follow like a strict physical regimen. Like they would have to wake up 6 in the morning and kind of like run and do push-ups, and like like some of the
Wow.
parents, they wanted the kids to follow the same footsteps. But I would still say for the most part it was just like a normal high school. Yeah.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you were in Germany for for several years, and then it was after that that you went to Malaysia, right?
So, okay, this is normally like I just glaze over everything. I just say like, oh yeah, I grew up in Germany, then I went to the States, then I went to Malaysia,
I
kind of
went to the
like how I
States.
started out.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's actually like this. So, I was in Germany from 0 to 6, and then I went to Malaysia for first and second grade, so 7 and 8 years old. Then 9 years old to 14, I was in Germany. 14 to 15, I was back in Malaysia. 15 to 16, I was in Germany. And then 16 onwards, I was in America.
US.
So
Right.
I bounced between Germany and Malaysia quite a lot. It's something that I guess I would like to speak on more in this podcast, but it is the more uncomfortable side of my childhood that I normally just not share with the world. Yeah.
Right. Sinya, why don't you start with your story? Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, yeah. So I don't remember much from when I was in kindergarten anymore, but I remember my parents or my mom bringing me back to Malaysia. So, okay, so I went to a German kindergarten from 4 to 6, and then when I started in first grade, my mom brought me back to Malaysia, and it was a very huge culture shock for me because it's the first time I had to wear a uniform. And then in Malaysia, even girls are not allowed to have long hair because it promotes promiscuity or sexuality according to that culture. So my mom had to cut my hair really short in like a bob style. And like I was very upset because it's like it stripped away what I felt like was a part of my identity. Like it's like everyone had to look the same. And I felt like I almost looked like a boy. And then, yeah, I remember going to school and the teachers are allowed to hit you. So they have either a ruler or a cane. And I remember the boys would get it worse than the girls. They would have, in Malaysia, it's called a rattan. And then it's like a long strip of bamboo almost. And they're basically allowed to like whip you. And I remember the boys, they would, misbehave a little bit more. They would act out in class. And the teacher would literally whip the boys. And I remember like my classmates, they would be crying and they'd be running around and the teacher would chase after them and literally like come here with
Wow.
the rattan. And it was really bad. And I remember thinking like, why would you be a teacher and basically abuse children like that? Like when the teacher would finally catch them by the ear and like she would have long nails and she would pinch the ears until like it was bleeding, like blood would come out, and the boys would, yeah, and the boys would be crying, and I would just sit there and I would be so scared, like don't say anything, don't do anything. Yeah,
And this
and
was allowed, like legally, it
yeah,
was allowed. Parents knew about all of this. Like, if the
yeah,
kid came home with a
yeah,
bleeding ear, the parents would be
yes.
okay with it.
Yeah, and I was so scared that it actually caused bladder problems, and I would actually pee myself, and I would get in trouble for that as well. And I mean, like that's long gone now, but like as a little kid, like
Yeah.
I would be so scared. I would pee myself at school. I would go back and I would tell my mother, and she'd be like, she would side with the teacher along with a lot of other parents. Like as kids, we would talk about it, and my friends would say the same thing. Like my dad thinks that like I should have paid more attention in class. I should have gotten better marks in school. I should have done more or like placed number one in class in order to not feel the wrath of the teacher and the parents, basically. Yeah, it's very common. Like that's just how the culture in Malaysia is. It's very disciplinarian and very, you have to conform and respect your elders, and it's almost twisted in such a negative way because it's like it's just used, and the phrase is just used to control people and like
Hmm.
to make you obey and not have your own voice and not be able to express yourself in any type of way.
Right. Can you talk to me about your relationship with your mom and dad? You mentioned that you were quite fearful of your mom, that she kind of always took the teacher's side. What about your dad in this situation or in this
So
time?
I have a very complicated relationship with my dad. I would like to say it's leaning more towards a positive relationship. I try very hard to be understanding of his situation in this whole scenario because so when I was in first grade, my dad was actually in Germany. He was more absent than present. And this is also very common because we come from a very traditional background where the man is supposed to be the provider. So his role is just to work and, yeah, earn money for the family. And the woman is supposed to be the one that's taking care of the child. But with that, I would still like to say that, like he is a lot more nurturing. Like I could actually feel his love even though he wasn't the primary caregiver. So like when I was in Germany, he's the one that taught me how to ride a bike. He's the one that taught me how to swim. He's the one that, like would ask me how my day was. So I could actually feel that there was someone there for me to a certain extent. Because what confused me is how could someone that is actually caring not be able to see how neglected I was by my mother. Yeah. It's just that because I have gone through very traumatic experiences with my mom, I don't, the only thing I don't understand is how he wasn't able to pick up on that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with your mom with some examples or instances?
So I mentioned that I had bladder problems stemming from my childhood. So basically this ties into like how my mom treated me and what she did to me. So when I was in kindergarten, I was at the normal age where you would stop wetting the bed. And then when I went back to Malaysia in first grade, it started happening again. At one point, my mom just got sick of washing my clothes all the time. Starting at the age of 9, I went back to Germany for third grade. And then my dad would be at the restaurant the whole day. So I would be left alone with my mother. And she basically had no one watching her, and she was able to basically lash out on me because I would have bladder problems. One day she decided after school that she just wouldn't give me clothes to wear anymore. So I would come home from school and she would ask me to strip, and I would only be given a t-shirt. I would be exposed from the waist down. I would beg her for clothes to wear, and she would just be like, no, like I don't want to wash your clothes, so you're not gonna get anything until you learn to stop wetting the pants. And she would leave the door open. So we stayed in a 2-bedroom apartment with only one bathroom, and the bathroom was right next to the front door. And she liked to leave the front door open for fresh air. But what that meant for me is that people walking down the hallway, they would be able to see me. So that actually made the problem worse because I would be too scared to go to the bathroom. And I would just hide in my room the whole day. And I would go in my room, like, and my room would just stink, and there's nothing I can do about it. I would just be scared and miserable. On a weekly basis, I had a tutor come over to teach me Chinese, and it was a 20-something-year-old guy. And I would be so scared that he would be able to see me, and the shirt that I would get to wear, I would just pull it down. I would pull it as far as I can and stretch them out and basically make them into a dress. And I would sit in the chair. I would pull the table as close to me as possible to try to hide myself. And for an hour, sometimes I would have to go to the bathroom, and I'd be too scared to stand up, and it would just, honestly, I mean, I'm very ashamed of it, but I would have no choice. I would basically go next to him, and I would hope that he doesn't realize that while I'm having lessons, I'm actually going to the bathroom with him sitting right next to me, and it's just trickling down my chair. And it was a very difficult and horrible time of my life. And what I'm ashamed of most is I would actually help my mom to cover it up, because sometimes she would just forget to give me clothes to wear, and I would hear my dad turning the keys, and I would run out of my room to my mom, and I would say, "Dad's coming, Dad's coming," and all my clothes are in their room, and she would run to her room, grab a pair of pants and just throw it at me, and sometimes it would just hit my face, and like I would just grab it and wear it, because one part of me is I didn't want my dad to see me like this, because at 9 I was already self-aware, like I didn't want to expose my body to more people than I had to. Secondly, I was afraid that he wouldn't believe me, like if he saw me like that and I were to tell him like, actually mom doesn't give me clothes to wear, I didn't want him to say like, oh, she probably just forgot, or you just came out of the shower, or like, or you could have taken it yourself. It would have crushed me that the one person that I believe loves me, like makes light of my situation. So I ended up helping my mom hide this from him for the next 1 to 2 years.
Do you think there was a part of you at that time when you were younger that also felt a little bit protective of your mom, in a sense that you also felt like you, or maybe not protective, maybe fearful that if my dad finds out, my mom's going to get even angrier and lash out at me even more?
I was very scared of that, because occasionally like we would go out as a family and like sometimes visit family friends, or like my school friends, like they would have a birthday party, and then parents there would actually observe how my mom was treating me. Sometimes I would talk to her, I'm like, mom, and she was very good at hiding it from my dad, but she didn't really care about other people. My dad wasn't around. She would say things like, I don't want to waste my breath on you. Like, that's like, you're just wasting my time. And she would just walk off with other parents standing there, and they would be in shock, and they would ask me like, hey, do you want me to talk to your mom for you? Like, the way she's talking to you is not right. And I would tell them, no, no, please don't, because all it's gonna do is anger her, and like, yeah, like I'm gonna get it when we go back home. She would regularly like slap me across the face, or like she would hit me, or like she would throw shoes at me, or like my mom would chase after me with a hanger. And like, I remember one time she forgot herself, and me and my mom were at my dad's restaurant, and she started doing that, and then all the guests were looking at her, and then she quickly like put it down and like composed herself. I was like, oh, the restaurant is my safe haven. Like, I can come here, and she can't just lash out on me. So
Yeah. Did you have like anyone at the time that you felt like you could trust or talk to about it? Say friends, teachers?
no. No. I didn't keep it to myself, but no one was willing to help me. So, I think when I was in elementary school, I didn't know how to articulate myself in a way that people understood that this was actually toxic and abusive. The way I said it was like, oh, my mom is so mean to me, and she's yelling at me every day, and, sometimes she's making fun of me. And people would just, my teachers or like the counselors, they would just twist it. Like, I don't think she's laughing at you. I think she's just making a joke, or I think, she's probably mad at you because you didn't listen to her. Like, they would try to give me advice and say like I should try to behave better, and they didn't really understand like the trauma that was going on in my house. And I mean, to be fair, I didn't tell them about, like my mom not giving me clothes to wear. I would just say like, oh yeah, like my mom is yelling at me, and like things like that. Like, she would, every day when I go to school, she would shout at me to wake up. Like, it wasn't like, hey, wake up. That was actually a very traumatic long-term event, because that's the first thing I hear when I wake up every day. It was like I felt like I was in jail, and like my mom would be like, Sienna, wake up, like, and it would just shock me
Jolt.
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. you know, and but when I would explain that to people, it was just like, oh, she probably called you a few times and you didn't hear her, and then like she's just, you know, like, hey, wake up. A lot of my friends, they'd be like, oh yeah, my mom like yells at me to get up for school too, but like they didn't understand the difference, and I didn't know how to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, do you remember like your mom sort of always being like this with you, or was it sort of like post the bladder issue when that started? How was it? Was it like a slow transition, or was it just like overnight she just flipped out and that's it? She just never kind of went back to being a loving mother again?
No, it was always like that. Even when I was a little kid, I remember when I was in kindergarten, I would tell her like she's walking too fast, because in kindergarten, obviously I'm like 3 feet tall, you know, and I'm almost like, I'm like,
Yeah,
mom,
waddling.
like I can't, yeah, I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't walk that fast, you know, or sometimes I would just be tired and I'm like, mom, can you please slow down? And she'd be speed walking, almost, it felt like to get rid of me. And she would just be like, hurry up, walk faster, walk faster. I remember people on the street would give us weird looks. She just didn't care. It was like the world just doesn't exist around her. I remember she would force me to eat all my food. So it's like, oh, there's, you know, like I would get the typical, like, there's starving kids in Africa. You have to finish your food.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like, as a little kid, my stomach is not as big as you as an adult, and you're giving me
Right.
a full plate of food. I can't. I literally I can't finish it. And I remember it's like my breakfast, either I don't eat anything. I would tell her like I don't want food, and she would make nothing for me, or she would make a whole meal for me. And then I would eat, and sometimes I would throw up on the way to kindergarten, because I'm not allowed to waste food. So, you know, eventually I would tell her like, just don't give me anything anymore. And I would just be hungry until lunch. It's like it was one or the other.
Can you tell me what was some of the, now looking back, I think you would probably be able to sort of reflect on it, but some of the signs that you may have displayed to an outsider, say to a teacher, to a friend, you know, the wetting the pants is definitely a sign
Yeah.
of some kind of extreme fear happening within. For example, even to your tutor coming in every day, knowing that you are not wearing pants. These are things that someone on the outside doesn't really require verbalizing, but people on the outside, teachers, friends, should be able to see. You mentioned that other parents were able to see how your mom was around you and they kind of picked up on the signs. But what were some other things that your behaviors, your body language was kind of displaying?
Yeah. So this is something one of my friends told me as a teenager. So I didn't even realize it until many years later. Like my one of my friends in high school. So this actually went on until high school. Whenever my friends would make sudden movements, I would hold my hands up to block myself, because I was scared that they were going to hit me. Like I have to be alert and protect myself and see what's happening. And my friend just asked me like, what's wrong with you? Like I'm not going to hit you. Why do you keep acting like this? You know, and that's the when I realized like, oh my God, like I have this defense mechanism where I think the whole world is just out to not to get me, but to like attack me in a way. And then just being very having very low self-esteem as a kid. I always kept my head down when I'm talking to people. Like I would be too afraid to look at them. Like I would just, you know, like kind of like is this okay? And like I would just be like a shrinking violet and just, you know, like try to make myself as small as possible, just so that people, like, I wouldn't attract any attention and I would just be, you know, invisible almost. So I think these were some of the signs that I wish other people would have picked up on more.
Like
Like
body
the
language, I
yeah,
guess.
my body language was very like
Yeah.
afraid. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you ever end up telling your dad about the abuse that happened at home, even way later down the line?
Yes, yes, I did. And I was right in the sense that it took him a lot of years to believe me. And even though I think he believes me now, nothing was done. So he's still living with my mom, and he's still, like treating her the same. Like it just baffles me, because like if I were to be married, and if my husband ever did anything like that to my kids, like I would just fly off the handles. I would call the cops. I would remove the children from the home. Like I would do all the things that I wish someone would have done for me.
Yeah.
And a part of me is very hurt and angry that my dad is choosing my mom over me. He's saying he's choosing the family as a whole, but how can you call that a family? So I actually have an older sister, and she's 5 years older, and my mom left my sister with my grandparents and never took care of her. So, this lack of motherly qualities stemmed like way before me. I think in her mind, it's like it was her duty to give birth to children, and then that's it. Like she fulfilled what she needed to do. And then she had my dad on lock for the rest of her life. And
Right.
like for her, she didn't even want to take care of the kids. It was like, oh, my grandmother can take care of my sister. And then she actually wanted to leave me in Malaysia as well. But my dad said no. Like, he wanted to be there for my upbringing. And then he thought that my mom would take care of me. But like as I mentioned, every couple years she would just send me back to Malaysia, or try to. But because I grew up in Germany for the most part of my life, I would keep telling my dad, I want to go back, I want to go back. Like I would beg my parents, like, please let me back to Germany. Like I don't belong in
Mm.
Malaysia, because it's such a huge culture shock. And when my parents sent me back when I was 14, I was living by myself. So that's actually another piece that I would like to share.
Yeah.
Um, because they basically rented a room for me, and I was walking to school every day by myself, and I had to find food, and they only gave me 60 ringgit a week. This was
Which is equivalent to like how
to
much in
$15. I had $15 a week. I asked my dad about this years later, because I told him I didn't have enough food. I had to steal food at 14 to survive. Yeah, because $15 is not enough.
yeah.
Even in Malaysia, even 15, 20 years ago, it's not enough money. Like, and I was supposed to use that for like school supplies, for clothes,
Mm.
for everything, right? Like getting minutes on my phone, like, and for bus rides, anything you can think of, that was supposed to be enough. And I was like, there's no way. $15 doesn't even feed me.
Yeah.
So how was I supposed to pay for anything else? So I would actually go to 7-Elevens, and I would steal bread, I would steal ice cream, I would wear long sleeve t-shirts that were like baggy, or like just jackets or hoodies. I would hold things in my hand, and I would just kind of like push it
Slip it
in,
into the
and like
sleeve.
like
Yeah.
slide whatever I can, or like I would just take it and put it in my pockets and just walk out. Or like I would maybe take 3 pieces of bread, and I would stuff two in my jacket and then pay for one, and then that's how I would
Right.
have meals for the next day or so. I remember I would only have one pair of shoes, and I didn't have an umbrella. And whenever it rained, I would just walk from my room to the school in pouring rain, right? And I remember, because I only had one pair of shoes, I would wear them down so much. There was holes in it. So the minute it rained, I would just step in, and like the water would just soak
Seep
up
right through. Yeah.
in my socks, in my pants, and I would have to sit there in class the whole entire day with just rainwater just soaking in me. They were so worn down that when I take them off, it would just collapse within itself. They were paper thin. So basically, the next day, I would have to peel my shoes open to wear
Wow.
them again. That was my sophomore year in high school, and people just they just avoided me. They just thought this is a kid that misbehaves or is very depressed, and I tried to tell my teachers, and my teacher would be like, this is not my job. My job is just to teach. So I just fell through the cracks, and the whole year I was begging my dad, like, please take me back, please take me back. And my mom, she was very spiteful. My mom would just ask me, did you go out today? I would be like, yeah. And she would ask me, so how many people did you sleep with today? And I would be so hurt, but I would just make up lies. And I remember I just said two. And she would say, I knew it. Just because if I would have said anything else, I was afraid that she would call me a liar and she would continue bashing me, like, I don't believe you, you must have done something. I just felt so defeated that I just said whatever she wanted to hear because, like she was
Like expecting you to be sort of this kind of person or something
like
in
a
a way.
slut or something when I was still a virgin when I was 15 years old, like that. Like I was just thinking about how to survive.
Did you have much of a relationship with your sister? No.
I don't blame her. I don't because so I over the years I could feel that she felt like I got the life that she never had. My parents took care of me and they didn't take care of her. So from her point of view, it's like, oh, like I got to grow up with my parents in Germany. I got to go to the international schools. I got like the nice first world lifestyle while she was dumped off in Malaysia and my grandparents had to take care of her.
It's like, yeah, the two sisters, in a sense, were kind of pitted against each other because,
Yeah.
of the way that you were separated and also not really like, it's hard to kind of establish this like a loving kind of conversation when, your environments are so different, even though you have the same set of parents, right?
Yeah.
What were some of your coping mechanisms? How did you, or did you have any coping mechanisms at the time?
Oh, I had one good coping mechanism, but most of them were bad. I'll start off with my good coping mechanism. So I got into art, any type of art. I would write songs, I would write poetry, I would draw or paint. I like to dance, like any form of verbal expression that would be my way of releasing the sadness and turning that into creativity. And every time I was feeling alone and I was in my room by myself, like I would just draw to express myself. But these moments were very few and far between because the only way I could do it was when the house was quiet, and for the most part it wasn't. Those times it would be like maybe once a month or something, and like where she would just go out and just have a walk by herself, and then I would finally have that peace and quiet where I'm able to express myself in a safe way. But for the most part I would just leave the house at 10 years old, and I would actually start stealing stuff from shopping centers. So at 9, I started going to friends' house. And I absolutely don't condone this. For me, my feeling was, I'm so wronged by this world. And to me, like, the whole world was just one thing. Like, I couldn't differentiate between my mother and my friends and a department store or anything. So whenever I felt hurt, I would just take something, anything from anybody, just to, like, in my head, balance it out. Like, you hurt me, I hurt you back. At 9, I started getting caught, and my friends started getting mad at me. So then I quickly stopped that. and then I started going to department stores.
Yeah.
And I would start stealing toys. I would start stealing like small jewelry. I wouldn't even want it.
I would imagine it would be a very, very much a control thing. Like, you don't have control over your bladder. You don't have control over your mom and her reaction to things. You don't have
Yeah.
control, even with your friends, they don't want to talk to you anymore because they see you a certain way. And you don't have control over the way the world is working. But what I do have control is what I take, when I take, where I take it, and how I,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so, yeah, I get it. I understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so that was like my way of like, you're right, like taking a little bit of control back for myself. Like I felt like almost in a way it's like I deserve this.
Can we fast forward to when you were, say, the first time being independent now as a university student? Can you tell me how you kind of processed all of this? How did this all sort of like come to you, and how did you manage and deal with it? And
I took a gap year, and then at 16, I went to California. That was still way too young. I did not have any skills that I needed to survive there. I didn't know how to cook for myself. I didn't know how to wash my clothes. I didn't know how to discipline myself and stay on task or stay on track with the schoolwork. I didn't know anything yet. So I had to learn a lot of that there. And I was also missing a lot of social skills that I needed to have. So when I was in Germany, I hung out with people. I didn't realize it at the time, but I hung out with people that have similar backgrounds. So their parents largely neglected them. And then when I went to college, for the most part, those are kids that come from stable upbringings. So they have a very different background. And I ended up repeating the same patterns where I had two groups of friends. One group was like, they saw the smart side of me. They saw that, like I'm very educated, but they didn't see the side that was hurting. They didn't know like of the abuse that I went through at home. And then I hung out with a lot of the, I guess, the what people would say degenerates of society, the people that selling drugs or they're in and out of jail, and they're very abusive towards their partners. And I actually would feel very comfortable with those type of people because I would be able to express myself in the way that I really feel. Like sometimes I would just be having a really bad day and I would really just want to be negative and let it out and curse and shout at the world, and I would want to smoke weed, and those people understood me. But deep down I also knew that these are not the type of people you're supposed to be surrounding yourself with if you want to get ahead in life.
And what about sort of like mentally? How have you sort of, say, not only unraveled, but like coped and processed all of this mentally, and so that you are able to live a more, happier, functional, successful sort of life for yourself today?
That happened in my 20s. So I
Okay.
grew up mentally later than other people because
Right.
I was stuck in the mindset that for a lot of years I was afraid of women. I thought that most women were out to hurt me. So I didn't really connect with a lot of female friends until much later in my life. Like I would hang out with, my other group of friends, and they were mostly guys. So I thought that guys are like safe and women are dangerous. That was the very twisted logic that I had in my head. And that's how I kind of kept it until in my 20s when I went back to Malaysia, and I started going to therapy. So that is actually how I was able to help myself, because I started coming to the realization that this is affecting my life, because I thought like, oh, if I just don't talk to my mother anymore, then everything will be fine. But obviously these things, they carry over to your present day relationships. If you try to, like build relationships with your coworkers or like with friends outside, like the differences became more and more obvious to me when
Right.
people started getting into relationships, and then the women would look at me a certain way, like, why are you talking to my boyfriend all the time? Like the
Mm.
differences became a lot more obvious, and then I had to really self-reflect and be like, what is different about me than other people? Like, why am I not integrating myself into society as well as I should? And then
Mm.
that's when I started going to therapy, and it took a few different tries. The first therapist actually told me like, you don't seem very sad. And I was like, well, do I have to put on a show for you? Like it
Yeah.
definitely takes a few tries before you find the right
Yeah.
match. And I was actually very surprised that the therapist that I connected with was a woman, because, I thought that men would be able to understand me better. But I in my 20s, I was already at the stage where I started to recognize that not all women were inherently evil. And then when I started going to therapy, initially I even brought my mother with me. I said that I wanted to work things out.
Wow.
And so the first few sessions, we would talk with the therapist, and the therapist would be able to see our interactions. I think the therapist, this was the first time I tried bringing my mother with me, because every time I would try to describe the situation, I don't think they really got the full picture. But then when my mom was there and I would describe the situation, and then the therapist would be able to see my mom's reaction, I think then finally I got someone to really believe me and understand me from my point of
Mm.
view. The therapist really helped me understand my emotions and how to navigate them. So, one of the things that I was really afraid of is my mom attacking me and embarrassing me in public. For example, she would say, oh, you should sit down right now. You should eat your food right now. You should make sure you greet your aunts and uncles. She would just try to basically order me around in front of
Mm.
people, and it was
Mm.
like degrading, and kind of like just show like who's boss in the situation,
Mm.
and make me feel really small. And I would tell this to my therapist, and my therapist taught me how to take back control of the situation. She's like, next time this happens, tell your mom, hey, I already know how to do these things. And my mom would obviously retort and be like, well, I'm just reminding you, like just in case you forget. And like, I'm your mother, you should listen to me. And, the therapist would tell me, just say to her like, you've already raised me to be better than that, and just come at it not in a defensive way, but in a very soft and calm way, and be like, I got this, it's okay, until my mom is quiet. That's when you've taken back control of the situation, and then you go
Mm.
about doing things that you want to do. Like, it's not, you're not doing it because she told you to do it. You're doing it because you wanted to do it, and you've made that clear in public. So that was basically her teaching me how to take back control of the situation in a healthy way, so that I'm not expressing myself by like stealing things from department
Yeah.
stores anymore.
Were you very fearful the very first time that you actually put that into practice, say in a public setting? Was it quite a difficult situation or circumstance for you?
Yes, I was very nervous, and I practiced at home. Like, I would run these scenarios in my head, and I would actually
Yeah.
practice at home like, okay, this is what I have to say. This is how I'm going to react. And then when it finally happened, sometimes it's I mean, progress is not a straight line. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes she would throw me a curveball, and then I would freak out. I would be like, "No, mom, this is not how it's supposed to go."
Right.
And then I would have to try again and like calm down, but all you can do is try your best.
Did you start to notice a change in the way she would speak to you and the way that she would respect you in public?
No, I never noticed a change in her, but what I did notice was a change in how my relatives treated me. So that was something, yeah, that was something that I'm really proud of overcoming, because initially I thought all my relatives are just like my mom, that
Right.
they're just out to get me and they're just out to hurt me. And then I would talk to my therapist about it, and she's like, well, you're all grown up now. Why don't you try to have another conversation with them and see how they would react? Because at one point, my mom would actually call her sisters, so my aunts, and complain about me. And when I first went back to Malaysia, I would get random calls from them. And they would be like, you need to treat your mother better. Like, she's very upset with you. And like, I would just get lectures on the phone out of nowhere. And it would confuse me because it's like, what did I
Mm,
do to you to deserve this, you know?
yeah.
And then when I started going to therapy, she's like, well, you're a different person now, and why don't you have another conversation with them? And I would practice, like, I would run that scenario and I would say, initially I would be very defensive and I would be like, no, my mom is like this, my mom did this to me, my mom did that to me, and it's unfair. And then my therapist taught me, like, well, how you're a better way of communicating is lean into the situation, agree with them, and then put doubt in their mind. So, a better way of saying it would be, I would really like to get along with my mom. I would really like to treat her better, but sometimes she makes it really difficult for me to do so. So, what I'm doing is I'm agreeing, I'm leaning into the situation, and then I'm allowing them to ask more questions as to why I'm not doing it, instead of coming in very hot and defensive and then basically just arguing with them.
Right.
So that allows for more of an open conversation. And then what was actually really surprising was that I never even had to use that. When I talk to them, they're like, "Oh, you have changed so much. It feels like you're a much happier person now. It feels like you're doing really well." And like, they just talk to me about very normal everyday stuff. Like, how's your job going? Where are you going for vacation? That's when it clicked in my head, like, you're not a little kid anymore. You're grown up now, and you have a lot more power and control about how people see you and how people interact with you.
That's so
Yeah.
amazing. And it's so admirable, sort of the way that you chose to handle the situation. Because, I can imagine you sort of going through a phase of, and you mentioned that you were defensive at times because you're so angry. There is like a part of you that needs to be able to let go of the emotional aspect of what had happened to you in order to be able to conduct yourself in a more calm and relaxed and responsive rather than reactive kind of manner. Right? Were you sort of taking these pieces of advice from your therapist and putting it into practice, and then you were able to let go of some of the anger that you felt? Or was it the other way around, where you had to work through letting go of the anger first before learning how to respond in that way?
That's a very good question. I think it's the first one. It's I had to learn the skills of how to process or how to kind of navigate the situation before I was able to let go. Like, it was like after I successfully had a good conversation where in my head I thought it could go bad, then like I would get that sense of relief, and then I would get the closure and I would be able to like let go, and like after I feel like I have overcome the situation, then the feelings would follow. So, like, I had to, yeah, really work hard to learn these skills to kind of communicate in a better way. And then, like, it turns out that they don't all hate me. Like, it was just all in my head, and like I just had to learn how to like navigate the world a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What's your relationship like with your mom now? Do you have a relationship with her?
No, I can't. That is something that I'm still working on, but I don't think I'm at the place in my life where I can have a relationship with her. It's just without what I feel is her taking accountability for the things that she has done to me, because to this day she gaslights me. She's like, no, this never happened, you're making this up. and it's a big part of my childhood. Like, it's the most traumatic event when I was a little kid. And for her to deny that, it hurts me too much for me to be able to have any sort of conversation with her, even about normal things, because everything just triggers me. She never evolved as a person.
Right.
She's still stuck from
In that
as
mindset.
in that time, and like I can't be there with her.
Yeah, fair enough. Can you tell me, final messages to our listeners? Maybe something you would like people to sort of know, with regards how to communicate with someone or how to pick up signs in a child. What kind of message would you like to give away with our listeners today?
I mean, it sounds very cliche, but try to treat everyone with as much compassion as possible. You never know what somebody is going through, especially children, when they don't know how to express themselves and, they're lashing out. It most probably means there's a much deeper issue that's going on within that person. And, not to judge them right away. And, especially with boys, when they get into fights, or they're shouting and yelling, they're probably struggling with something that they don't know how to express yet. And to judge them or to demonize them for it, it's not helpful, and it's just going to make the problem worse. So I would always try to look at every situation with as much compassion and understanding as possible.
Yeah. And what about for someone who's trying to work through their traumas as an adult? Any advice for people in how to support or how to better listen or communicate with someone who's undoing some of the traumas in their childhood as an adult?
Obviously, therapy has been very helpful for me. And I would say, take some time to self-reflect and understand your emotions.
Yeah.
Not when you're in it, but just when you have the time, have an hour to yourself. Don't watch TV, don't look at your phone, don't do anything. Just think about how you feel in certain situations, and just one thing that my therapist has taught me that is really good is go back to your inner child, when you're feeling scared or angry or sad. Just pretend in your head how you wish someone would have been there or reacted in that situation towards you, and be that person. Say for example, you as a kid you failed in your math test or something, and then your parents are yelling at you, they're mad at you, and as a kid, you would have wished that your parent would have said it's okay, just try again. And whatever you wish that person would have said to you, say it to yourself now. Be the person that you wish was there for you.
Right. I love that. Thank you so much, Sin Yian, for for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, and just being so brave as an individual.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Lucas Piri,
Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.